The fairy tales we know and love today weren't always the feel-good Disney films that we see. Many of them actually started out as grim and dark tales with heavy social commentary, death, abuse, and racism. And while the core message has been retained in most of these modern versions, they also shed the darker themes. However, there are a few out there that sought to bring back some of the darker aspects, and even add in a few of their own. So today, we're going over 8 bizarre versions of famous children's fairy tales. The Snow Queen, 1976. Recently brought back into the limelight with Disney's Frozen, The Snow Queen is a Danish fairy tale, written in 1844. It focuses on the struggle between good and evil, taken on by a young girl named Gerda and a young boy named Kai. The evil Snow Queen corrupts Kai's heart, and Gerda must bring him back to his senses. While Frozen is definitely the most popular adaptation of The Snow Queen, the first English version of the fairy tale is also quite noteworthy. Produced by the BBC in 1976, the story is largely the same. An evil mirror has been shattered and repurposed into many things, such as windows and lampposts. One of the lampposts shatters, and a shard gets into Kai's eye, corrupting his heart. The Snow Queen takes him away for no good reason, and Gerda must save him. This version is slightly darker than most, as we have never seen Kai before he turns evil. He's even shown right after he gets the shard in his eye. The film also ends with the Snow Queen causing an earthquake, almost killing the children. Luckily, they're protected by magic, and they find themselves back home as if nothing happened. But Kai is still the same, nothing changed. He doesn't get better, the film just ends on that downer note. Aside from the unfortunate ending, there is some terrifying imagery in this film, such as a woman with no face, just a black void with snow falling. Not the most disturbing film on our list, but still noteworthy.
Aladdin al-Bhutha Vilachem. I probably just butchered that. It's also known as Aladdin's Magical Lamp. It's an Indian adaptation of Aladdin's story from Arabian Nights in 1979. The film falls into the Malayalam cinema industry, which is based in the southern state of Kerala, and is dedicated to presenting films in the Malayalam language. It was said to be the industry's first film in CinemaScope, but sadly was delayed due to post-production issues. In this story, the evil Grand Sorcerer, who is essentially the Jafar of this film, the Commander-in-Chief, and Aladdin are all fighting for Princess Roshni's hand in marriage, who fills the Princess Jasmine role. The Grand Sorcerer seeks a magic lamp to make his wish come true. In order to find it in the mountains, one must go on a 1001-day penance, which would be 3 years to us. The story more or less follows the version we know, albeit a lot more impromptu dancing and terrifying imagery, such as a man with a hand for a face. While the Disney story we all know is very simple with its love angle, only focusing on Aladdin, Jasmine, and Jafar, this version has multiple suitors for Roshni's heart, and even some girls pinning after Aladdin. Compared to most versions of this tale, there's a lot more violence and disturbing content, including a scene where Aladdin's mother goes to the palace and barely escapes with her life after being beaten and attacked. Like the Snow White Queen, this film ends rather abruptly too. Aladdin is reunited with the princess after the final battle against the Grand Sorcerer, where he's beaten to a pulp. The genie doesn't go free. I guess Disney had to add in some things to keep it in line with their history of happy endings.
The Frog Prince. In 1986, the production company Canon Films created a musical film based on the Frog Prince fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. It was filmed in Israel and originally premiered in the United Kingdom with an American release 2 years later. The film follows Princess Zora, who is mercilessly teased by her sister Henrietta due to only one of them being a true princess. Neither of them know which is the real princess, however. She soon meets Ribbit, a gentlemanly frog-like man. The two become fast friends as Ribbit teaches her how to be a princess, much to Henrietta's dismay. She kidnaps Ribbit and leaves him in a ditch with no water. Zora finds him and kisses him on the cheek, turning him into a prince. Apparently, only a true princess can break the curse, so she was the real princess all along. The story itself is harmless and doesn't stray too far from the source material. Rather, it's the makeup on the titular frog prince that is disturbing. One look and it's immediately clear why a child would be traumatized from such a thing. It's also rather uncomfortable that there is an implied romance between the two when Zora is 15 and the Frog Prince is almost 20 years her senior.
Tim Burton's Hansel and Gretel. The modern king of wacky goth aesthetic, Tim Burton is known for his dark and weird reimaginings of famous tales, such as Alice in Wonderland and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. However, in 1982 he took a crack at another famous children's story, this time focusing on Hansel and Gretel by the Brothers Grimm. It was a TV special that aired on the Disney Channel on Halloween of 1983 and was never broadcasted again. At the time, Burton was rarely allowed to express his own unique style at his job with Disney, and after his success with the short film Vincent, Disney decided to let him try once again with Hansel and Gretel. After all, Disney goes hand in hand with fairy tales, right? While initially thought to be lost or to have never even existed, Burton's version of Hansel and Gretel remained elusive for years. That is until 2009, when the Museum of Modern Art featured a retrospective on Tim Burton. Thanks to that, it has made its way online where it can be viewed now in its entirety. Upon viewing the short, it's easy to see why Disney wanted nothing to do with it, and why it was aired so late on the channel. Featuring an all-Japanese cast, with the host being played by the late Vincent Price, the short has all the spirals and strange architecture we've come to expect from Burton. However, it also featured very dark themes, such as references to child abuse, scary clowns, and a gingerbread man who just might be a child predator. The short didn't do well at all, and after he was given another chance to work with live actors on Frankenweenie, which also failed to meet Disney's expectations, Burton was fired from Disney, but found his first true success with their rival Warner Brothers on the film Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Though not everyone's cup of tea, the short is worth a watch, as it is a very unique take on the classic tale. It also gives a look into the mind of Tim Burton, and where he was at that point in his life. Many have thought that the film represents his time at Disney in a way, with the children and their father being forced to make toys, but never allowed to play with them. Fans of Tim Burton and creepy fairy tales alike will really enjoy it.
German Pinocchio. The original Disney version of Pinocchio is known for being one of the few fairy tales that Disney left relatively unchanged in terms of dark content. The 1940 film features a lot of scary imagery for children and dark implications with the whole children turning into donkeys forever thing. In 1967, a German version of Pinocchio was released, with an English version released in 1969. The film is largely the same as the fairy tale, but as it is live action, Pinocchio is played by a real marionette doll. Dolls are often seen as frightening or unsettling, so it's no surprise why many children were frightened by this adaptation. In addition, there are many scenes that are more tense and frightening than the Disney version, where Pinocchio is about to be kidnapped. The scene is fast, tense, and rough, with Pinocchio running as fast as he can, with the two kidnappers clawing and grabbing at him. He runs and begs others to help him out, but nobody believes or helps him. It's rather upsetting to watch as this child desperately pleads for help, ultimately leading him to be grabbed, tied down, and dragged away screaming. Luckily, he is saved, but it does not take away the impact of the scene. Later on, the carnival and donkey scene is also quite hectic and uncomfortable, but to be fair, that is the case in almost every version of this tale. If you're easily frightened by dolls in tense situations, give this one a pass.
Czechoslovakian Alice in Wonderland. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, written by Lewis Carroll in 1865, has become the fairy tale for people to make dark and edgy adaptations out of. Examples include Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland and the video game American McGee's Alice, as well as its sequel Alice Madness Returns, both receiving an M rating. Many of these adaptations take the aspect of madness to the 8th degree, turning Wonderland into a nightmare of horror, gore, and abstract fear. One of the first adaptations to go down this route was the 1988 Czechoslovakian film, simply titled Alice. The film is a mixture of live action and stop motion, making for some uncanny and uncomfortable moments and scenes. In a strange choice, almost all the dialogue is spoken by Alice in an extreme close-up. As she shrinks and grows, her smaller form is depicted as an emotionless doll. Wonderland is shown to be more surreal than usual, almost existing as a state of mind. There's barely any dialogue, and the story is told through motion. The film is oozing with uncomfortable close-ups, unsettling movements, and stop-motion skeletal creatures with bulging eyeballs. If you're looking for a truly surreal and dark Alice in Wonderland, look no further. Unlike the Tim Burton film, it is not simply the aesthetic that is dark, but the overall feeling it leaves within you.
Mexican Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood and the Monsters is a 1962 Mexican film in which Red Riding Hood and Tom Thumb fight Dracula and Frankenstein in the woods. Yep, it's one of those films. It opens up with the Queen of Badness holding a trial against the wolf for not being evil enough. At this point, we learn that this film is a musical, or rather it fools you into thinking it is, as there are only songs in the first 20 minutes and then in the ending. This film is less disturbing in content and more disturbing in the fact that it exists. The dub version in particular is rather incredibly irritating to listen to. The film lacks any sort of direction or budget, going all over the place in terms of creatures and content. And for some reason, Dracula, Frankenstein, and the evil queen from Snow White are all out to get Red Riding Hood, as well as a dragon, a robot, and something called Mr. Hurricane. There are a few uncomfortable scenes, like when the villagers are all turned into animals, but it comes off more laughable due to the bad costume design. The more disturbing content comes from our main characters themselves, who actually torture the monsters they defeat in the woods. They even tie one monster up like a piñata and beat him senseless. It truly is a sight to behold. Japanese Red Riding Hood. Our last entry is quite possibly the strangest one on our list. We're looking at a Japanese manga, rather than a film, titled Tokyo Red Hood, inspired by Little Red Riding Hood. It was written in 2003 and stars an 11-year-old girl obsessed with being eaten by a being known as Mr. Wolf. Red Riding Hood seeks to be eaten to end her immortal life, but is frequently stopped by the Church and Disciples of God. Apparently, being eaten by Mr. Wolf would bring about the end of the world. Other disturbing details include her working as an organ harvester, as well as the different sex acts she partakes in. The manga is extremely violent, over the top, and sexual. Red Riding Hood herself is a masochist, and derives sexual pleasure from pain, leading to many bloody sex scenes. Towards the end, it's revealed that she is the princess of the demon world, and Mr. Wolf is her son, conceived as a way to bring balance to the world. Tokyo Red Hood is an adaptation in name alone, and has barely anything to do with the original fairy tale. The manga was quite popular due to its messed up content, so I think it deserves the #1 spot on this list.